Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Spiritual Psychic TV and this show, Being Spiritual, with me, your host, Ashley Robinson. It's wonderful to be back with you folks. It's certainly been a warm day in South London, and I do hope that wherever you've been safe, you've had some fun, or you've certainly done some fun things with people that you enjoy spending time with. 17th of June. Feels like we're making fast progress through the year already. This is going to be my last show for a month. I'm about to have weight loss surgery on the 27th of June. I'm going to take a little bit of time off in July, and I'll be back in August. No doubt you will see lots of updates on SPTV. And for those of you on things like Facebook, head over to the SPTV fan page. And of course, on SPTV UK, you can have a look at the schedule. You can see all the wonderful things on SPTV. So tonight, folks, it's a spiritualist philosophy show. We're going to be chatting about anything spiritual. There's a couple of things I want to share with you. Some of that's about some spiritual experiences I've had today when I went to what some people might describe as a so-called or alleged haunted house. And in fact, I visited two residential houses today in London and did some spiritual investigation with my mum. My lovely mum. Good evening and welcome to those on YouTube. If you want to participate in the chat, just make sure you've logged in, participate in the live chat. Do make sure you share it. Now's a good opportunity to do it, because when you do, the stream stops for a couple of seconds. On Facebook, things are a little bit easier. Just comment on the main live video stream and we will be able to see your comments in the studio. So a good test of that is always to share this stream quickly now, maybe tag someone you think might be interested in watching it, and then come back and say perhaps who you are, where you are, and whether or not you're watching the show for the first time. We were coming back as a long-time sufferer of Ashley Robinson, and we'll try and do a couple of shout-outs, and we'll say hello to you, and it'd be nice to know where you are. I was just chatting to Richard James before we went online, and was making comment about the fantastic spiritual and psychic fair, mind-body sort of spiritual fair we had. SPTV ran in Portsmouth, or Waterlooville in Portsmouth last week. Absolutely fantastic. It was great to see so many SPTV fans there. Several hundred people come and saw us over the Saturday. I was doing a little bit of spiritual counselling. I was doing a little bit of Q&A. Richard also gave me the opportunity to talk to people a little bit about my sort of spiritual philosophy. We had a really great and engaging chat with the people there. So watch out for the next one. There could be one at Christmas. And the best way to do that is make sure you're subscribing to everything on Facebook and YouTube, that you've got your notifications switched on, that you're regularly checking out the SPTV channels. And of course, we're across all of the socials. How many of you are on TikTok? Is it just the youngsters? You've got people like me on TikTok now, giving it a whirl. Good little platform for sharing videos. We're open to share more content across TikTok. SPTV or SPTV UK. You'll find us on Instagram and Facebook, Twitter, and of course, if you're watching live today on YouTube. I myself at Ash Robinson Medium. I'm across all of those social media platforms. Make sure that you've added SPTV UK as a favourite. And do engage with us, folks. So I do wonder how many people we've got watching this evening, on this warm evening. How many of you are lying in a cold swimming pool outside, finishing the end of the week with a nice cold drink? We've got Mary Dixie watching on YouTube this evening. Hello, Mary. Wow. Now, this is quite interesting. In fact, 7 more people, folks, and we will have 14,000 SPTV viewers. Good evening, Mr. Phil Shaw. If you're watching tonight and you're watching on YouTube, have you made sure that you've subscribed to the channel on Facebook? If you're on Facebook, have you also subscribed to YouTube? Because we are just 7 people away from 14,000 people. So please make sure you get across. Good evening, Julian Cross. Welcome to you, mate. Wouldn't that be lovely if we do it tonight? Jill Hancock, hi to you. Is that 14,000 on Facebook in particular, Richard? Yeah, 14,000 followers. So we're 7 away. Louise Passmore, good evening. So particularly to you YouTubers, if you've never been over to Facebook, do give us a like today. Wouldn't it be great if we had 7 extra from this show? Sylvia Freestone, good evening to you. Looking forward to the show. I'm pleased you are, Sylvia. Always lovely to have you here. Lovely Terry Louise, good evening to you. great ambassador for SBTV. It was lovely seeing you last week. Did enjoy my picture with Alison and Terry, the two admins, and the pain in the neck, the fawn, Ashley Robinson in the middle. See that photo on SPTV fan page. Wendy Gawley, good evening to you. Yes, everyone is as well that can be well. Thank you, Wendy. That's lovely. Good evening to you. Ben Davis, how's it all going? How's it going indeed, Ben? It's splendid. Absolutely splendid. Considering myself to be feeling pretty blessed. Thank you very much. Lovely Claire Coolbeck. Good evening to you. Hiya, Claire. Alison Barton, the other Rose in my photograph of fawns. Good evening, Alison. Wendy says, good luck with your surgery. Thank you very much. Yeah, do send me your love and lights and healing on the 27th, folks. That's appreciated. Julie Caswell, good evening to you. Grace Wilson, first time watching. Good evening, Grace. A special welcome to all our first time viewers. And Grace, if you've got any questions you want to ask us, anything spiritual, spiritualism, then do ask. Keith, good evening to you. Keith Bernard Abbott. Everyone, hopes everyone is doing okay. First time seeing you, says Jill Hancock. First time seeing you. I'll be seeing you. Good to see you. Andy Plank, hello and welcome. Linda Wallace, good evening to you. Joining us on YouTube tonight. Lovely Natalie Bentley, good evening. Hiya. Leanne Holmes, welcome. Okay. I hope I've given most of you a good shout out. Hello there to Sally Ann. Jade Fleming, good evening. Amanda Hyde, hiya. Angela Dodd, welcome. Hi, Janice Guild. And hi, Pat Gilfman. So we still, every now and then, there's a few gremlins in the algorithms. We don't always get all of your comments, but the vast majority will get back to the studio and Richard will relay them. So if you ask a question later and you've not seen it come up, give us a little while. And if it still hasn't come up, then try posting it again. So, folks, tonight is a spiritualist philosophy show. And I said I was going to share with you. Are you there, Karen King? Share with you a little bit about some experiences I had this afternoon and this evening. I think most of you that know me or certainly know of me know that I've, as well as being a spiritualist medium and being born into a spiritualist family, a few years ago, I set off on a pathway to be an ordained minister within spiritualism. I've been working with an organisation called United Spiritualists. That's one of the bodies, awarding bodies that can accredit us. Some big ones in the UK, the SNU, and probably too many to mention tonight. But I've gone down that pathway of United Spiritualists, and I've just completed my spiritual counselling course. That's run by the lovely Reverend Leslie Moulton. She's one of our principal tutors at Wimbledon Spiritualist Church. She runs all our spiritual healing, and she's one of United Spiritualists' trainers for spiritual counselling. So sort of keen to get out into the field and put the counselling to test. Richard gave me that opportunity last week at the Mind, Body, Soul Fair. But being the webmaster for Wimbledon Spiritualist Church, I think since I was about 11 years old, answering the phone and emails right through to sort of modern day technology, I would say quite common. Almost as frequent as someone making contact to organise a private reading or find out about an order of service is, can someone please tell me what's happening at my home? Often it comes with a sense of panic or a sense of anxiety, because you think about that early activity with the Fox sisters several hundred years ago. When things go bang or bump in the night, I know that there's a certain amount of panic. And you're looking for super normal explanations. And of course, when you can't find a super normal explanation, you start thinking about the supernatural. You start thinking about life after life and whether or not we have someone trying to give us some type of physical phenomenon. So over the years, I remember ever since I was a young kid, I'd watched my mum and dad go out to visit these places, different mediums, including my godfather, Bob Brunton, who now guides me from the spirit world with my mediumship. Rosie Tinsley, hi from Australia. Hiya, Rosie. And was always fascinated to learn some of these stories. My grandfather, over 40 years ago, going to what was described as a haunted allotment to find things, not necessarily going bump in the night, but huge sacks of grain actually levitating. My grandfather was actually able to witness some of this. And often you start to get a little bit of confirmation from the spirit world that it's them, or it's not them, or who it is, or who it may be. But I would say 9 times out of 10, there's been something going on at that place, at that location, at that house, or at that family that has created some energy. Now, we're always talking about energy on this show, folks. You know, I love a good layman's talk around energy and atoms. But of course, in our houses, there is residual energy. There is the energy of the day. You know, the house today is feeling the heat of the day. The tears of kids. My boy is being told to put down the iPad and get dressed and go and see Nan and Granddad. Perhaps arguments, you know, if I walked into that room when someone's just had an argument, you can almost feel it, can't you? You can feel that tension or that anxiety. And buildings are themselves made of energy. So like a sponge, they can hold on to this sort of residual energy. My house, where I am broadcasting from tonight, was built in the 1930s. There was a previous owner, a guy called Mr. William Spur, now resides in the spirit world. We were the second family to come in here, and every now and then he would pop in and say hello and see what was going on. But when we started doing major works and changing windows and stuff like that, he sort of turned up and didn't like that. It was his house. In fact, he'd been the principal architect in our road and sort of had designed his house and had it painted and decorated in the way he wanted. And sometimes because of that physical relationship that he had with it when he was a human being, going through that human experience, as a spirit being, he liked to pop in. So you get that type of energy. Of course, as you go back through history, before 1930s, this was a field, before that, you go back and back and back, and you on certain sites all over the world, you'll obviously find that they are particularly important from a history point of view. Lots of colonies and settlements, lots of things might have gone on there, and depending around the dramatic circumstances, you know, thinking about hospitals, or particularly hospitals dealing with mental health, rehab centres or rehabilitation, those types of places, you know, all of that mental energy, all of that psychological drama that's happening during someone's experience, all of that can start to, almost like wallpaper on the wall, hold a bit of energy. There's a lovely lady that's watching tonight, Shirley Monaco. Special hello to Shirley Monaco. Shirley's almost like surrogate Nan to me. I've grown up with Shirley in my life. She's one of our spiritualist mediums at Wimbledon Spiritualist Church. She's actually demonstrating her mediumship this Sunday. So anyone wants to check her out, she's at Wimbledon Spiritualist Church Sunday morning. One of the things that Shirley does is she reads objects, and she reads the energy of the objects. And I think on Sunday morning there'll be like a little tray, numbered 1 to 30. You can leave things in this tray. She picks up the tray and says, right, I'm now reading number 12, and she'll start to tell you about the object, the energy of the object. And often after sort of doing that sort of psychic reading, thinking about the energy of the object, she also then starts to get a link, and she gets a communicator, and she blends her mediumship with her sort of psychic skills. And there are lots of people that can do that. They can read that. There are people that can work with cards, and they ask you to charge the cards, don't they? I remember sitting at the festival last Saturday. They want you to touch the cards and shuffle them, put your energy on them, or the stones, the runes. Other people might get you to drink a cup of tea, and they read the tea leaves afterwards, or coffee. So there's all sorts of different ways at psychic level of working with this energy. And again, when people get in contact with their local church, it's often not because they're excited about it, it's because there is an element of fear or an element of doubt. Sometimes there's a sort of question mark about, just what is it? I'd like to know a little bit more about it. And in preparing to go and visit two houses today, I had a good chat with my dad, minister at Wimbledon Hatbridge Church, and he gave me some really good pointers, and he helped me just focus again on the difference between working at a psychic level, working as a spiritualist medium, the fact that this was a visit as the church. This wasn't a private reading at someone's house. And I think it was really important to sort of set boundaries and expectations. It's really important with our own protection to make sure that I was fully grounded and prepared, mentally and physically before I went to the house, as well as being prepared and protected psychically and spiritually for actually doing the work, and equally cleansed as I sort of lived. Now, both houses I'm going to talk a little bit about without breaking any confidence. we had someone get in contact with us that were living on their own, and there were things happening, including voices, objects being moved, doors being opened. And while they'd always been aware of spirit and they had, a strong belief in a life after death, this felt different. It felt increased, and there was an element of anxiety attached to that because they weren't quite sure what it was. And in visiting that house, one of the things that I would do is I sit down with my guide team in my mind's eye, and we start preparing. I sort of send some in advance. They're my forward intelligence team. They go and do a quick recce. They're looking at the house, the inside, the outside. They're seeing if they can start to pick up things. Almost like, if you can imagine an episode of The Bill. For anyone not in England that wouldn't have remembered The Bill, it's all about our sort of metropolitan policing. But in The Bill, you'd always have a bit of a stakeout. I'm sure if you've not watched The Bill, you've seen a cop movie where you've got police officers in the cars doing a stakeout and undress. Well, I sort of send my spirit team in advance to do that, to check out the house, to check out the energy in the family. And I'm also protecting myself. To a certain extent, I am looking for activity, but what I'm looking for is evidence of activity. We take into account all of the information that we've got. And as part of arriving, really important to show absolute respect for the people, the situation that they're going through, to explain and to manage expectations about what we're to do, opening in prayer and having that protection and letting them know, in plain English, what it is we were doing. And what starts as a bit of a sort of, very light introduction, really, this is what I am doing, this is why I'm here, this is what we're going to achieve today, what are your goals? What sort of opportunities do we have? Let's look at the options of today's visit. This is not what the visit is, but this is what the visit could be. And then asking some questions and getting them to talk, which is very different to mediumship, where we say, don't ask any questions. We're just going to tell you about the communicator. It's part of doing any type of investigation. As Malcolm Robinson always says, your mind needs to work like a parachute, and parachutes work better with them open. So does your mind. You're asking questions to get a better understanding, a little bit about the person, a little bit about the client, a little bit about the house. What do they already know? Because it's important to sort of deter from fact and fiction. So that's exactly what we got through. We had a little bit about the story and why the lady was in the sort of scenario she was, a little bit about her age and the upbringing and the house that she had been into. And she had close relatives in the spirit world. In fact, she'd had readings and she'd had evidence of them. But equally, they were able to share about circumstances involving a relationship, and they were able to tell us a little bit about that. And actually, as all that information was coming in, we then had confirmation, my mum and I, from the spirit world about who it wasn't in the spirit world that was making these changes in their house, but confirmation these things were around. And the other really, 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 really important thing that this lady needed to know was there was nothing evil, because Hollywood kind of prepares us for that, folks, doesn't it? Is there something evil? Do I have an entity or an attachment or a poltergeist? Sharon says, I think my mum been around my pans banging the cupboard. If it isn't her, I got mice for boots on. Thank you for sharing that, Sharon. So, able to establish that actually there is nothing evil here. Far from it. A beautiful home. And what was really important in that situation is also to give confirmation about why it was a beautiful home, because of their values, because of their attitude that influenced their behavior, the way they treated themselves, the way they treated their home, the respect they gave to people coming in. All of those things in themselves create nice energy and nice foundations. And it was a house that had been, surrounded by nothing but unconditional love for years. So it was a nice house. And of course, in a world which has pockets of darkness, when you have lovely houses surrounded and lovely homes surrounded by unconditional love, it is a light. Now, we know that the darkness cannot extinguish light. And we know, of course, know that wherever you shine the light at darkness, it will potentially attract. Think about like flies being attracted to the blue lights. So sometimes when we have a house of love and light, things, people, personalities, energies in the darkness are attracted to that. But we've said before, folks, birds of a feather flock together. So darkness attracts darkness, light attracts light. We attract light. So love and light generally attracts love and light. And actually, one of the things that I've often picked up when I go into houses, particularly in my law enforcement and sort of civil service career, was you could kind of pick up on the bad vibes. And it's really important to trust your intuition and the instinct, isn't it? When your body's saying, yeah, this isn't right, or cross the road, or don't cross the road, zig, don't zag, or zag, don't zig. All of those intuitions, all of those skills, all of your six senses become very, very important. And ultimately, in that first sort of house scenario, we were able to play back some of the information we got from the spirit world. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of details. As I say, it breaks some confidentiality. But ultimately, we got to the scenario where we now had an explanation about what was happening. We were able to be quite clear with spirit around the feelings that this provoked and the fact that we would need to continue with, less anxiety, and that therefore it was great to know that we were getting evidence of people's life after life. But actually, we also needed to deal with some of the human things going on within the human lives attached to this lady's family. She was able to provide confirmation from all of that. Right, greetings from Dublin. Hiya, Maureen. And that itself is really important. And how we finished that visit was asking if this person would be able to give consent for us to send absent healing, that we would put their name and their home in our absent healing book. Hi, Tina Lacey. Good evening to everyone. Sitting on the beach in British Bay, Wicklow. Very nice. Thank you for checking us out, Tina, from the beach at British Bay. And of course, they were open to that concept, that power of prayer. So absent healing coming their way on top of the love and light they already had. So it's a balance of yin yang. Darkness has a place in the universe. I think so, Keith. Yeah, absolutely. It has a place. It's easier to extinguish darkness with light. Light is, in my opinion, more powerful. Nothing dark can hurt me unless I invite it to do so. So that's also really important. And we finished with a lovely little blessing and a lovely little prayer for this house. Now, the prayer was something that my dad had actually come across. We looked in the United Spiritualists book. There is some guidance for ministers around, to use an old term, sort of almost exorcism. But my dad had come up with some lovely bits and pieces that he wanted to share with me. I think one of the prayers that he had actually written himself, and the other one was something that he had found on the internet. It was a house blessing, and it was really lovely. I'm just going to read it to you now, folks. Smoke of air and fire of earth, cleanse and bless this home and earth. Drive away all harm and fear. Only good may enter here. That was such a lovely, short, sharp, and punchy. Tash Goodwin, I'll come back to your question in a minute if the producer leaves it up for me. Lovely little home blessing there. And the reason I'm saying it today is you can all repeat that. You can all bless your homes. You don't need a minister, an ordained person to do that. You just need to do it with love and the right intention. Now, Tash Goodwin says, what if you're 50% dark and 50% light? Do you still need to do more work on your shadow side? Well, that's quite a deep question, Tash. I mean, I'd be interested if you're prepared to share why in this scenario you think someone might be 50-50. I mean, we're all made up of millions and millions of different atoms. And if you think about dark as anything negative and light as everything positive, then I suppose it's very likely that no one is 100% light. We'll all have elements of our life which, if we were to judge ourselves by our higher standards or our higher self, we might think, well, what about that time we cheated? What about that time we pinched that extra potato off your sister's plate? Or that time we went a little bit faster than the speed limit said we should have done? What about a little white lie we told to get 5 minutes extra reading time before we had to go to bed? So there'd be elements, I suppose, of negative. And if you think about it as a sort of a sliding scale, you could argue, let's say on a scale of 1 to 7, 7 was absolute light and positive energy, positive love, light, laughter, and intention. You could say that 0 was the scale of darkness. I don't know if I'd go as saying pure evil. Let's just say darkness, negativity. So much negativity that you can't really make out anything positive. Then as soon as you start to move up that scale with a 1, you're saying you're starting to show some positivity. And that in itself is an upwards rising trajectory And that is a good trajectory to be in. And as soon as you get to sort of then more like a 2, you're saying, well, now there's a lot more positive energy, but there is still some negative. And then you sort of get to your 3, and now you're saying, well, we're now almost approaching that sort of 50-50, aren't we, between 1 and 7? And we're saying that this 3, there is some positive energy, there's some positive intention, there's some love, there's some light, but there is still maybe a thread or a foundation of darkness. And then you sort of get to that happy 4, and you're like, this is good. This feels like a satisfactory place. So going back to your point, Tash, what about 50-50 and you're told you're in balance? It's almost like that 4, isn't it? That 1 to 7, where you are genuinely living a positive life of positive intention in love and light, but you've got elements and foundations of negativity or darkness. And I think that's probably very true about us all. And you could argue if you're at a 4 and you're hoping to, go towards paradise or utopia, whatever you want out of your life experience, that you've always got the opportunity to rise, to progress from a 4 to a 5, from a 5 to a 6, from a 6 to a 7. And from a point of afterlife, I think that we're probably the only judge that we meet is the judge of ourselves. We become our own judge. If we're going to be in prison, we're going to be in a prison of our own making. But perhaps within the spirit world, there are opportunities to progress there too. So does an earthly 4 get you to the afterlife and everything's satisfactory, but you decide you want to be a 5? You want to be more positive than negative, and you continue to work and give service in the spirit world. And I was once told, in order to progress within the spirit world, nothing negative can progress. So perhaps there's this element of doing service from the spirit world to get yourself from a 4 to a 5, from a 5 to 6, from a 6 to a 7, absolute positivity and love and light. And perhaps you can only do so much from the spirit world in terms of service. And you end up deciding to choose another experience as a human being, work off some of that negativity or karma. So yeah, good question, Tash. I want to tell you now then briefly about the second house. So the second house almost happened by accident, because we had a phone call and a contact on social media from someone that wanted us to come visit, and it turned out, of all the places in the world, that this was 10 minutes from this other location, quite close to the church. So on the day I said, I'm actually in the area, can I come now? And they very much wanted us to do, because there's an element of sort of fear and anxiety there. Different situation, a very busy, active family home across 3 stories, 3 or 4 generations of families sort of all co-living. And within that house, there was an awful lot of energy. Fantastic energy. There's so much excitement, so much adventure, so many people living interesting lives. Keith, I'll come to your question in a moment. And ultimately, again, within that house, the important thing for them to know was, is there something nasty here? Is there something evil? Because actually they gave me photographic evidence of all sorts of strange things which were unexplained. Writing on the wall, etchings on the wall, things being moved, objects being thrown potentially, and strange things unexplained. I'll just pause there for a second. So Keith said the space in between is life source of each particle. So without light, there would be dark, and vice versa. Yeah, good point, Keith. Thank you for sharing that with folks. So in this house, again, huge relief that nothing evil. And I think that Hollywood has a lot to answer sometimes, because Hollywood gives us an idea of what negativity, darkness could look like. Your famous films like your Poltergeists and Exorcisms, all of those types of things, including some of the more lighter stuff, like the shows with witches and warlocks, places like Charmed, what they start to contextualize as good and evil. A lot of that plants even subconscious thoughts in the back of our mind. For example, the number 666. Is it the mark of the beast, the mark of the devil? Is it the sign of something negative? Or is your perception wrong? Is it 999? Is it a call for help? Is it a sign of an emergency? Is it to tell you that first responders are on their way, that your call has been held? So everything has a slightly different perception. Sharon says, I ask the universe, I say I'm positive, I'm going to take what the universe throws at me, good or bad. I know we have good or bad, but we're thankful for what we reserve. Yes, absolutely, Sharon. That's very true. Now, within this house, I had confirmation from spirits who gave evidence of their life after life that they were around, and indeed another beautiful house surrounded by unconditional love. But there was some anxiety there because there were things that were unexplained. And we asked spirit to see if they could give us a little bit of an explanation. And we started to get some of that. We were also told that there were human interference too. Now, by human interference, what I mean is you can't rule out a human being being a human being. And we said that like attracts like. Practical jokers attract practical jokers. And if someone was a bit of a wind-up merchant while they were alive, why in that life afterlife would they not be a bit of a practical joker? So we do get mischief. Now, mischief for me doesn't fall into the spirit of evil or negativity, but of course, spirit beings who are very mischievous, that are trying to have a bit of a laugh and a giggle, they can have lots of unexplained things. Now, physical phenomenon in any film, I actually think is incredibly difficult to create. I say that as someone that goes and almost provokes spirit to do exactly that in closed circles, in fantastic sort of situations where we have brilliant energy in the church. And without a doubt, things can happen, and I have seen some great physical phenomena. But equally, in situations of desperation, in situations of abuse, and I'm thinking hypothetically now as opposed to today's experience, but alcohol abuse, solvent abuse, drug abuse, domestic abuse, all of that negative energy created by human beings becomes residual energy. And actually, as we said, darkness attracts darkness. And if those things are done in poor intention or bad intention, that can attract darkness. Equally, light can be attracted too, because it comes to the situation. It wants to be heard. Second cousin twice removed turns up from the spirit world and says, I'm not happy about this situation, and I'm going to keep banging on that pipe with this spirit bar I've manifested until someone comes into this house and starts to see that there are things going on. And over the last 40 years of my parents doing home visits, sadly, they have come across all of those different situations. Children in real safeguarding issues where they've had to be referred to social services, cries from help from both male and female victims of domestic abuse, people in the family with addictions and coming into very difficult and desperate sort of situations. Equally with my grandfather, back to that allotment. Actually, the reason you had big bags of grain floating in the air is that someone from the allotment was nicking. They were embezzling money. And one of the guys that used to be in the allotment weren't happy about that, and he was going to make enough noise until he got a medium to come down. And he said to the medium, that bloke's a thief. And actually, the allotment did an investigation, found out he had been embezzling money and been taking money. So sometimes there are simple explanations to it. Sometimes people are interested in what's going on. Parents have given examples of houses they've been into where people are just not unhappy with the fact you've just cut down their favourite tree, and they feel so attached to that previous experience they haven't really progressed much more within the spirit world. My godfather, Bob Brunton, who's one of my spiritualist mediums, my mum was telling a story today about a house that Bob went to, and there was a member of the family that had died, and they'd been brought up with an upbringing and culture which had led them to believe that after death, there was nothing until the bugle. You would lay in your coffin until someone from heaven, was ready to judge and deal with the condemned, and you'd hear this bugle and you could rise from your grave. So even though he had no need for his physical body and he'd left it, the spirit being was still very much attached to that previous experience. And it took Bob to go and get a local priest to come in and explain the theory behind the bugle. And in the end, in the spirit world, they had to go and find the bishop, wherever it was, that had told him about this bugle in the spirit world, drag him out of his retirement and say, you need to explain this to him, because now you understand how it all works and you're happy to go into the light. He's waiting for your bugle. So, we've got to remember that our personality very much goes with us. We are a product of our culture and our upbringing. And one of the final things that I'm going to share is just some of the Harry Edward teachings about children in the spirit world. I have a mischievous child called Marigold that often works with me. Had first made herself known to my dad when he first sat in circle, and she is a good girl. She's a lovely, beautiful girl, died a long time ago, but she likes to have fun and she likes to play, and that personality still very much existent. And if you count her time in heaven in earth years, she's been up there a few hundred years, probably back to sort of Victorian days, and she's decided not to grow up much older than that. Now, Julie Caswell says, in our family home, you always had the feeling someone was watching. When my dad passed, that feeling went. We think he got it to move when he passed. Yeah, absolutely. Turned up, said, "Oh, sling your hook. It's my patch. I'm now in charge of this." My grandfather used to joke while he was alive that he was going to go on a poltergeist training course. He was going to learn how to do it and how to do it properly. So last few minutes, folks, of me talking before we take more questions. I want to share something again from Harry Edwards, one of the most amazing healers in sort of my lifetime. My granddad used to say he was one of the best healers since Jesus. But he wrote a book called Life in Spirit. And I shared a couple of stories about the nurseries of heaven a couple of weeks ago, folks. And for those of you watching, remember we spoke about these nurseries for children and spirit beings and the education and stuff that they've done. Well, I wanted to sort of share another chapter from one of those lessons, because today I was very aware of spirit beings who had not had an earthly experience. And I had shared some personal experience with you all, folks, about my own children. I'm lucky enough to have three gorgeous boys now. One is a couple of months old. I've got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. But we tried 10 years before Ethan was physically born, and we had several what the hospital referred to as failed pregnancies or miscarriages. And I asked lots of questions about the soul. You know, what point does a spirit being sort of fuse by way of interface with the body? And, you know, from a medical terms, I was told that the baby needed to be at least 6 months old for it to have developed enough of a human sort of being body for the spirit self to interface. But as I started to do my own research and investigation to that, it was actually at the point of conception that the spirit being was aware. And I'm going to share a little bit about that. Alison Barton says, when my dad died, we used to hear the key going in the lock at the time he would come home from work. Yeah, creatures of habit as well, and sometimes going through that routine, really important. So fast forward to that point in the story that Harry Edwards was talking about these nurseries in heaven, and a couple of his friends, including a lady called Mary, in a sort of meditative state, was in heaven, was visiting heaven, having that out-of-body experience, or using a mind's eye to astral travel, looking at these nurseries and children. And they found at what they described as the most beautiful, shining, alabaster-like building, richly ornamented, rising up to a shining dome from which thousands upon thousands of rays of silver light beamed out in all directions. These rays penetrated through the spirit realm, linking up with the life force on earth, and it is by these that the life force of the babe, be it ever so young, is brought to spirit life. Evening, Stace. So I'm now going to read directly from the book about their experience of this beautiful being with these silver rays, and it backs up a bit of philosophy I have around the point of conception. And Harry Edwards' friend Mary had asked the guide, who, for want of a better words, was almost like a heavenly equivalent of a sister of the ward. Mary said, "How can that be?" As soon as the life force of the father joins in with that of the mother, in other words, at the point of conception, there is born a new life ready to take its place in fulfilling its destiny. Even if by reasons of the mother's health or by unnatural artificial means the baby's life is terminated, it is only the physical existence which ends. The young and immature life does not end, but is received here and brought under warm and loving care. The fetus grows and develops well, taking far less time than it would need in earthly life. It will need nourishment, for it is still partly physical. It has not reached that stage of advancement for it to accept spirit awareness. As soon as the eyes open and the ears can hear, as soon as it can use its voice and its hands hold a finger, as soon as its mind, for its brain, becomes aware of these things and is able to receive strength to accept spirit growth and development, then the need for the equivalent of a physical nourishment is dispensed with. Entering this wonderful baby's hospital, they saw a spacious central hall. Of such beauty they were spellbound. From this central hall, avenues off in a number of directions, and so long that they as visitors could not see any end to them. A lady dressed like a nursing sister came up to the visitors and beckoned them to follow her. They were taken into a spacious room whose dimensions were not easy to calculate. They seemed to be ever extendable. The dominant colour theme was a warm shade of pink, possessing a vibrant living radiation which seemed to be everywhere. Seated in the room, in no disciplined or regimented order, were scores upon scores of nurses, sitting quietly, and many of them could be seen to be holding something very small. "I believe they are holding babies," said Mary. She whispered, "Yes, they are," immediately commented the sister. "Now come here and watch. We are expecting a new arrival." They gathered at the side of one of the nurses, who sat so still and quiet as if she were a statue, her hands held out in front of her, and they all remained motionless. Then an illumination came to the nurse, and a beam of shining silver white light came straight to her hands. It appeared to come from the ceiling and grow clearer and stronger. As they looked at the hands, they saw forming within them a very small, darker substance. The hands closed over it, and the motionless custodian of the new life took her hands unto herself. Her eyes were closed, but on her saintly face was suspicion of a smile of content. The sister said to her charges, "She is happy, and a little life will grow within her hands." We will now visit some of the other sisters, and you'll be able to see the new little lives growing, their limbs and their bodies, and coming into conscious life. It was a different scene in another endless room. Here aborted and premature babies were received, and others who did not survive their entry into earthly life. The babies were not in cots as in earthly hospitals, but lay on a kind of softest material lining a basket. It seemed very strange to Mary that she could not hear any of the babies crying, and she mentioned this to the sister. "Why should they cry?" the sister replied. "They are in no pain, for they are no longer subject to the physical feelings which make babies cry. They cannot have a stomachache. They do not need earthly milk to sustain a material life. As we help them to discover themselves, to see and understand what they see, as they become conscious of the love we give them, so they are contented and happy. It takes a little time for them to become conscious that they are living. Babies have the need to learn just one thing at a time, to recognize what they see, to understand what it is they hear, to hold on to something and pass it from hand to hand. The bodies grow all the time, and this takes place until they find a way to use their limbs. The bodies grow as the mind becomes more knowing, and as soon as they're able to walk and speak and sing a little, then their special nurses take them to a very young nursery and stay with them for a while until they begin to feel they are persons, and they learn to love their new teacher nurses and enjoy playing with other little ones of their own age. They are then set on the road of life. They are not hurried to grow, for time should be given to establish well the foundation for their future, and to give them all the time that can be to allow them to appreciate the many things which can delight a young mind. There is no need to hurry in this life, for we have no measurement of time. The last question Mary asked the sister to explain was, why was it that there was still so much difference in the characteristics between the children? With the care each one received, why did they not evolve in the same pattern? "This is a good question," said the sister, "and it needs a studied answer. We need to go back to the beginning of things. Life here comes from an earthly inception. New lives are not born here. Birth has to conform to God's laws, divine law of creation, as they concern physical life. The laws are immutable. The laws do not divide spirit life from the physical, they interlink. Communication between them exists. One proceeds from the other, but birth is a function of physical life. Apart from life promoted by the division of a single cell, it is the law that there must be a fusion of masculine and feminine cells to produce a new life. The moment such a fusion takes place, a new life comes into being. A successful fusion depends upon the male and female chromosomes joining together to make the perfect whole, for the spirit to enter into it. Within the chromosomes, there are many genes which give character to the new life just formed. The genes are the inheritors of the qualities of life, good and evil, which have gone before them. So at the time of conception, the genetic qualities have joined together, giving character, personality, and all the other detail to form the new life. And when an immature passing of a fetus takes place, spirit leaves the material part behind, and that which comes to us is the embryo of a complete life, with genes to fashion what it is to be. From this you will see why some children are fair and others are dark, why the skin of one is white while others are yellow or dark. So it was then that John and Mary left the nurseries of heaven, thinking deeply. Thank you, folks, for bearing with me as I shared some of that from Harry Edwards' Life in Spirit. For me, it rings absolutely true. And each time I read that, I feel quite animated by it. I can visualize it. And for me, it sums up so many things. Now, let's open up to your questions. Maria says, we are free of our earthly bodies in the spirit world. We are whole and well. Absolutely, Maria. Now, often as a medium, I get evidence from the communicator that the first thing they did in heaven was recreate their physical body in a spiritual body, minus any of the imperfections. And I think that although I am a believer in reincarnation, what we're saying there is that at that point of conception, the new being comes to its existence in that place I call heaven. And it continues to grow and nurture. And they are looked after from a spirit world right up to the point of physical birth. And if something happens, which means that that birth does not complete, then for me there is a lovely answer about what may happen. So what do you think, folks? Does that also make sense to you? Is there anything you would like to share? What are your thoughts on life being entering at that point of conception? Sally Ann, good evening to you. Sally Ann shares, I've had miscarriages. It's such a tragic event. It's made me wonder if they changed their minds after so many months and hence no longer wanted to be here on this earth plane. Is this how you view it, Ashley, or not? In my opinion, Sally, I think that when the birth is unable to take place in such things as a miscarriage, the evidence that I've had personally about my children who have not been able to live an earthly life was that mother and fetus was not strong enough. Ultimately, in order to live a human being experience, they need a vessel. And if the vessel is not going to be strong enough, if something has not gone right from a biological point of view, then actually it just doesn't happen. But actually, at the point of conception, they had a destiny to fulfill. And I have had evidence from spirit beings who are like, I was unable to fulfill my destiny because just things didn't go right. I've had evidence from the spirit world, for example, that my wife was unable to carry females. And that actually we've had 3 boys, healthy, fit and well. It just took that biological stuff to take place. I suppose, Sally Ann, from what you're saying, anything is possible. But personally, I've never experienced that, and I've personally never given evidence to that. If anyone has, or if that is your fault, then I'm not saying you're wrong, Sally Ann. It's just, my humble opinion. But yeah, for me, it's just a case they were unable to incarnate and have that experience in that body. I think that every child that is born is a child that's meant to be. And I think from Harry Edwards' book was saying that every conception was meant to be, and that being had a destiny. And for some, that destiny was unable to transfigure into an incarnation on earth, but they continue. Thank you, Sally Ann. Good question. I hope it's getting a bit dark now, folks. I don't have a top light on. I'm hoping you can all still see me. If I need to add any additional light, please let me or the producer know. Sally Ann has a follow-up question. How do we access our Akashic records? And is it important for us to know all the Akashic records entail? Well, I'll answer that twofold. And again, caveated by the fact this is my opinion, Sally Ann. It's my opinion backed up on my own experience and what my guides tell me. But my guides all had human existence and very much their personality. Even one of them, Sai, who's in Earth years, hasn't been on Earth for the last 4,000 years. So the Akashic records are important, and like energy and residual energy, they're a record of everything that has taken place. Through deep meditation or through regression, it is possible to access them. But I actually believe, even though I believe in reincarnation, and I believe in past lives, and I myself have gone through past life regression, I've had a glimpse of some of my records. I actually think that in this earthly experience and incarnation, it is of no value or importance at all. Now, there are many people that would contradict me on that and say it's absolutely important. It's all part of your awakening, all part of your destiny. But I am of the firm believer that if it were important to remember past lives, we would be born with that corporate memory of them. We wouldn't have to go as deep to find them. I think that from a higher self point of view, there is perhaps some more value. If we think about that big picture on karma, and the idea being that you get to heaven. So let's take Ashley Robinson, finishes his earthly life and experience, goes back home to that place called heaven, gets there and is aware of the way that heaven works. And then they say, well, Ashley Robinson, at the point of conception, your energy, your being came to be. So then there's that thing of, well, hang on, if Ashley Robinson had previous lives or previous incarnations, wasn't it surely his soul that had reincarnated? So wasn't his soul what became of the baby? Well, Harry Edwards' book is talking about the energy of the mother and the father combining at the point of conception to create that life being. So my limited knowledge of atoms exist. Within atoms are particles. Particles are on themselves individual intelligence. Intelligence, life, intelligence, particles. Everything's made of atoms. After the change our body goes through called death, our personality goes on to survive. Atoms, energy, particles. We know that particles of energy can exist in more than one place at the same time. And we know that particles of energy can be in constant communication with each other. So not only does this open the realms of potential multiple universes and dimensions, it also opens this thing that perhaps the personality of Ashley Robinson is just one element of my higher self experiencing life as a human being through the energy of Ashley Robinson, created by the conception from Ray and Jackie Robinson at the point of having a baby. So when we look at our past lives, is it that we as a soul and as human beings, we love thinking about the solid, don't we? And I think, right, the soul is like my hard drive. My hard drive is uploaded to the cloud. When I can't finish my body, the computers can put my soul is uploaded. It's in the cloud. When I get to the cloud, I realize that that was just one folder. Ashley Robinson experience, one folder. Now I've rejoined the cloud. There was another one. It was my previous life as a fisherman out in the Caribbean, a couple of 100 years ago, or when I was a soldier, in World War I. Maybe these previous lives are just little folders on that hard drive now in the cloud, and actually the user of those folders is like, that's my higher self. Ashley Robinson, lovely little experience. I'll add that to the Acacia records. Now, what should we do next? Oh, look, there's the opportunity there to put about to create a baby. Those beings come together. Now, the reason I answer that in such a strange way is I do believe in souls, and I do believe in soul groups. I do believe that it's possible to incarnate again. And I think to a certain extent, there's an element of choosing the life that you're going to be. So again, it's all part of energy. And I think all of the energy that comes together, there are elements like fingerprints, like DNA, like breadcrumbs, which spread out across what we understand to be the soul. So if you want to learn more about access to those records, there are lots of good meditations you can do. There are past life regressionists. There's a couple on SPTV, like Kirsty Grogan. You can find out more about this. And ultimately, through deep meditation, you can keep going back within your mind's eye to understand a life or a personality. And I would say that, it's very difficult to research these, but if you start getting good bits of evidence, you can start to research and see if these are people that had a human being existence and whether or not you can find them. Certainly in the UK, we go right back to the Saxons and the Doomsday Books and everything else, the census that was kept. We can look back to sort of Roman records to a certain extent, and you can start to find names and you can find out more about your names. You can do some great research with your ancestry and your DNA as well, and you can combine that with the spiritual. What I would say is it's unlikely that all of us had famous past lives. So don't look for the stereotypical past life. But if you're looking for lessons and you're looking to understand karma and lessons learned in previous incarnations, then yeah, I think there could be some real value in understanding that in terms of your service. Sally Ann says, I'm an old soul. I've been here many times before. Thank you, Sally Ann, for sharing that. I think you said previously that I had sort of answered your question. And perhaps I've provoked a few more people to come in with their own opinions on stuff. What do you think, folks? Is the soul, like Dr. Sam Beckett, traveling through the universe, incarnating and having different experiences, a bit like Dax on Star Trek Deep Space Nine? If we've got any Trekkies on here, I always thought that Dax was an interesting character that had all the memories of the lives, because Dax in itself was a being within a being. Slater says, so what's the difference between old soul and new soul? I assume he's still talking spiritual as opposed to music. Slater Paul, Liz. I think that what we've got right now, I call it the personality of Ashley Robinson. I also refer to that personality as the soul. I believe the difference between a human being and a corpse is the presence of the soul, and that when our body goes through that change we call death, the soul continues to have a life after life, and our soul is attached to the personality of Ashley Robinson because that's the incarnation and that's the experience. Perhaps the soul is like a piece of the pizza and it rejoins the mother pizza or the great pond. Again, lots of sci-fi analogies here, but there was the changeling that was in charge of security on Deep Space Nine. He used to be part of the great pool when they could in different rooms. Perhaps it's a bit like that, like a glass of water. Our soul gets poured into the great pool, and our soul was just part of that experience, part of our higher self, our higher being experiencing different things. Hopefully that answers that. Okay, approaching the last few minutes of the show, folks. So do get your questions in. How long does it take for a soul to reincarnate to the next life? Oh, good question, Leanne. What do you think, folks? In China, they would say that it's immediate, or bits of China and parts of China. And to a certain extent, previous Chinese emperors, they looked to the very second of a baby being born and an emperor dying to look for the next emperor. And they believe in this constant sort of wheel of life and that it can happen immediately. I think that that is possible. But actually, I believe that it was at the point of conception. So when the baby's born, I don't think that's when the personality and the soul enter the body. I think it was at the point of conception. So don't wish to offend any ancient sort of Chinese believers, but I think the emperor's probably 9 months too late when they look at the actual birth of the child. But that is their belief. Their belief is the soul enters at the point of birth, not the point of conception. Some people, I don't think, reincarnate at all. I think you have one earthly experience. That's it. You've had enough. Thank you very much. Off you go to go off to the halls of learning and look to progress within the spirit world. I think that lots of us do. My personal opinion is that lots of us do it multiple times. Some of us would do it hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of times. And as a spiritualist medium, the best evidence I've had from communicators is most of the time we do it third or fourth generation in terms of Earth years. And that's often because we grow attached to the personality and the life we've lived, the family we've lived with, and we want to see how they progress. And we watch over them from heaven. We look forward to seeing them again in heaven. So in the same way that they grieve when we leave earth to go to heaven, we wait for them to come to heaven. And then in heaven, they grieve when we leave heaven to go and incarnate. There's this constant cycle. So the vast majority of sort of mediumship evidence I've had from communicators and indeed my own guides are people tend to wait 3 or 4 generations of family so they can catch up with grandchildren, great-grandchildren, etc. People that they had within their earthly experience they want to see. Other times, yeah, I think it is possible to do it immediately. Leanne, good question. Hopefully that answers that one. Christine Woodham, my first circle leader in sunny Spain, says, I've been told that in a sleep state I work with baby and children who have health problems. I think it is so. If you think it is so, then it must be so. And you're a very wise person, Christine. So, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And you're sharing that. And lots of us continue to do work. Lots of us learn in a sleep state. Some of you would be aware of the concept of trance mediumship, or mediums that work in a trance state. And mediums that go into this trance state often talk about going off, almost leaving their body, letting a communicator come in and take control of it, or partial control of it. And they go off and do a bit of work. People talk about out-of-body experiences. I was going to say out of office experience. That's me now, so I'm not in the office. This out of body experience and the ability to do things. And for spirit to work with us and influence it. Yeah, so lots of possibilities there. And a sleep state is often a state where people in the spirit world can come close to us. You start to have the conscious mind wind down a little. Thank you for sharing that, Christine. Tina Simpson, good evening to you. My granddaughter just suffered 3rd-degree burns from plasma matches. Is this something she signed up for? Tina, the honest answer is I don't know. From a point of philosophy, there are many spiritual philosophers that would say that everything that does happen was meant to happen. And there is an element of us playing the role of a character in a play that has a start and end with lots of plots and stories in the middle. And everything that happens was meant to happen because it did happen. It was part of destiny. I'm of the personal belief that we also have free will. And within our free will, we have other people's free will. And other people's free will and our free will crosses over. We're born without any real knowledge of the spirit world and our guide team. And whether or not we listen to our instinct and intuition is, again, up to us. I know that the spirit world, anything can happen in the spirit world almost immediately. It's a place of pure thought, but they cannot influence this earthly experience in the same way they do the spirit world. So, in my opinion, something like 3rd-degree burns with plasma matches is a sad and tragic accident. I can't believe that it was always destined and meant to be. That's my personal opinion. One of my mentors, first time I mentioned his night tonight, Mr. Ralph A. Steadman, would say, no, actually, you need to look deeper. It was meant to be. And I would argue with him, quite politely, well, Ralph, why would someone choose to burn a child? What is there to be learnt from that? And he said, you've got to look deeper at that. Perhaps in a previous life, they had seen people be burnt and they wanted to experience it. Perhaps they want to come back, and from that burning, they're going to go on to create wonderful potions or creams or lotions or treatments for people with burns. Perhaps they're going to come up with a fire safety strategy, and they chose a life where they were going to experience something at the early part of their life that influenced and inspired them to do that. Now, Ralph was a very, very wise man, and the vast majority of everything he said I found absolutely compatible with my own beliefs. But when I used to talk to him about stuff like this, I feel I was limited by my own palate as Ashley Robinson in trying to understand it all. Because I'd get really deep with him and go, Ralph, what about child cancer? What on earth has child cancer got to do? And he would argue that, it's all, again, part of something bigger. Human beings on earth that have had free will have created certain conditions that increases the likelihood of certain cancers developing. Planet Earth is a training and experimental planet. Things don't always go according to plan, but when they do, there is some good to be had of it, because if cancer is going to exist and you want to do something about it, perhaps in order to truly understand it, to be more sympathetic and empathetic, you decide to go through and experience it so you can come back as a helper, as a doctor, as a scientist that comes up with a cure. So I think that Ralph used to believe he'd lived tens of thousands of lives, and you could argue as an older soul that was just at peace with understanding that you didn't need to understand in this life why you would choose something difficult. So in answer to the question, I don't think that would be part of destiny and something that they did sign up for. I do think it's possible, and I'm open to the conception that, not bound by our earthly experiences, in the spirit world, when the mother and the father are about to create us, at that point of conception, there's this element of my higher self creating to that, for that being, and looking in Blockbuster Video equivalent of choosing life, say, I can see why that's going to be important later in life. So I'm very sorry that has happened, Tina. With your permission, we'll all send them some love and some light for a speedy recovery from any suffering and any pain. It sounds awful. I myself had burnt myself playing my matches when I was little. The reason I lay on that experience is I don't believe that was part of my destiny. I was mucking about with my cousins. I'd been told not to play with the matches. Perhaps that was the destiny. But this stupid bit of me, this free will in an experiment, decided to do it anyway. Not only did I burn myself, I burnt a hole in the lino. I get my mum and dad to confirm that. And I've still got that mark on my thumb. I think when the lino caught fire, I tried to put it out of my thumb, which is when I burnt myself. So very lucky and blessed in that way that I didn't end up with with terrible burns. I do think that was my own free will. I don't have a huge memory about the moment. I remember doing it. There was probably, I like to believe, my principal guide saying, don't do it. And then my free will was like, I can do whatever I want. And I did it anyway. I think that from the experience of giving messages as a medium, you often hear about communicators taking responsibility, self-responsibility for their decisions and for their lifestyle. And for me, that's confirmation that our free will can influence our destiny. So Tina, God bless you. With permission, we'll send some love and light, and we wish you a speedy recovery. Now, Rosie, probably one of the last questions for the evening. When connecting to spirit for sitters, I will give a name that to me references to the spirit energy present. Sometimes other people on lives will resonate with the name or names I give. How do you deal with that, and what is that called? Thank you. Right, that is quite a complicated one, Rosie. Let me read it again to make sure I've understood it. So you're a working medium, and when you're connecting to spirit, traditional spiritualist mediumship, as I would call that, you are giving evidence of the personality of the communicator. Yeah. Absolutely. That's the spirit energy. This is the evidence. I've got someone here, for example, who's claiming to be your mum who passed with a heart-related condition in February. Sometimes other people on lives will resonate with the name or names I give. How do you deal with that? The way that I would explain that then, Rosie, is as a spirit being, they are in this metaphoric helicopter, right? They can see the bigger picture. Now, being in a helicopter, they can touch down, they can land with us, they can give messages of upliftment and hope, they can give their cheeky resemblance of their personality, they can give us evidence of that. But because they've been in the helicopter and they've been back in the spirit world, with the opportunity and the intention, they can learn about stuff. So perhaps they are aware of things and they feel that in their opinion, it would be useful to share those names. But if the names make sense and it resonates with them, then I think you give them. As a medium, we have personal responsibility about the information, the evidence we give. And if there's no harm in doing that and the person understands, then yeah, absolutely, spot on. Thank you, Rosie. So I might have time for one or two quick questions. Otherwise, folks, we're approaching the end of the evening. Leanne comes in with, do we all leave our bodies at night during dreams? I don't think so, Leanne. I've got a 2-month-old. I barely even I barely even get to sleep, let alone leave my body at the moment before Oscar wakes us up. I think some people do. I think that with intention, you can leave quite easily. We also know that from medical states and comas and things. But during dreams, I think there is a neurological explanation for our minds going through that. We are firmly within our bodies. There are many fused interfaces of our spirit body, our human body, psychological, everything that is kind of fused together, these interfaces. I just think that our mind's eye can wander like an umbilical cord without actually leaving. But there are opportunities to leave your body. There are people that call themselves remote viewers, where they can leave their body and then go and see something else. A good friend of mine, Vari Kent, her parents were MOD, Ministry of Defence, that's UK Ministry of Defence, remote viewers during the Second World War, parachuted into occupied France and used to remotely view Nazi pilot coordinates, transmit them to each other back in London headquarters, who would think about tactically withdrawing from a site, reducing the likelihood of civilian casualties, or in the crafty tricks of war, the MOD used to set fire to cardboard targets right next to the targets they believed Nazi pilots were about to bomb. And they believed that that had some success. Also some success in deflecting people's intentions. We know that, for example, Nazi pilots used to use the River Thames as a bit of a guide towards London. And Vari Kent's parents would claim that they would try and screw up that navigation, send them off course. We know that lots of bombs never went off. We're still finding them today. We know lots of bombs perhaps never hit their target. Sadly, many, many people did die. So it wasn't a complete success. But that was 2 human beings who were employed by the MOD as remote viewers. So lots of opportunities there, Leanne. You had the last question. Thank you very much, Leanne, for that. And thank you to all of you for a wonderful evening. Stay Sure said that makes sense, Ash. Nothing gets changed until something bad happens. Speed bumps and limits far to reduce road deaths. Football stadium safety didn't change until after Hillsborough. Yeah, some good contextualised examples there, Stace. There are probably a couple of adverts, folks, but this weekend, I think that the usual program is being replaced by a few different things. So head over to SPTV UK, check out the schedule, stay up to date, make sure your notifications are switched on. There are lots of regular slots and regular shows. Are there any adverts this evening, Richard, you wanted to play? Okay, a couple of adverts that are going to come at the end, folks. But I'm going to say good night and God bless. We've worked up some energy tonight. Let's send that energy out with positive intention to those people that need it. Thank you, Tina, for the good luck and best wishes. Love and light to you all. Good night.
Tomorrow night on SPTV, we offer a free evening of mediumship with some of the UK best-serving mediums and spiritual advisors. Our show starts from 8 p.m. UK time.